Hi everyone, my name is Kathy O'Reilly and I'm here to talk to you about the Capstone projects. Again, apologies I can't be there with you today, but I suppose if anybody can understand how tricky it can be sometimes to balance work and family, it is you all. So again, thank you for understanding that, and apologies I can't be there with you this morning. What I'd like to do in this short video is just to give you an overview of the Capstone project. I know that's something that you're curious about, and now that you're in year 2, something that you have kind of on your radar. So over the next few minutes, I'm going to give you a run through of what the capstone is about, so why we do the capstone and why it's important, and then a little bit about the process and how it works. So the key questions that I'm sure you have in terms of how you select a capstone project, how you choose your teams, how it's graded, etc. Okay, so firstly, if we look at why we do the capstone project, the capstone, by its very nature, is it's designed to help you to apply what you've learned over the course of your MBA. You've studied so many different subjects and you've learned so many different tools and frameworks and approaches. I'm sure many of you have already had the chance to apply a lot of those in your work environment. But with the capstone, the idea behind it is to really consolidate that learning and to apply it in a meaningful and valuable way. So that's why we do the capstone, because it's really the culmination, I guess, of what you've learned on your MBA, and it shows that you can apply that in practice. Again, you probably have already done so in the workplace, but this is a way that we formalize that through the capstone project. So that's what it is, and obviously it's important because, like we said, it's a way to show what you've learned, apply what you've learned in a real and meaningful way by working on a real project for a real company. So taking it from the classroom into a more real-world environment. It's also important, let's be honest, because academically it's worth the equivalent of 2 modules, so that's another reason why it's important. So let me just talk you through the process then. You can choose your own capstone project. Again, as executive MBAs, we want to make sure that you get as much value as possible from the capstone project. And one great way of really ensuring that value is to let you identify a project in your own organization or an organization with which you're familiar, that you can find a project and nominate that as a capstone project. Again, on the Blackboard site for the capstone project, you'll see a project nomination form. I'll talk about that a little bit later. But so you can nominate a capstone project. Again, in the current selection of capstone projects, we had someone who is on the board of a charitable organization. So she decided to do her capstone project on a topic that's very relevant to that particular charity. So again, that's very valuable for her in her own context. So you can choose, as I said, to work with the company for whom you're working, or a company you have worked with before, or maybe a friend or a family member who has an organization, or again, maybe a charity that you're interested in. And then you get to select your team as well. So in terms of how the teams are selected, we give you control over that process as well. So talk to your classmates. That gives you the opportunity to either nominate a project for your own organization, or if there's someone among your colleagues or your classmates who works in an industry, say, that you'd like to get some experience in, that you're curious about, or you'd like to find out more about, you might want to say, hey, you know, if you're interested in doing a capstone on your organization, that's something I'd be interested in doing. So that's the way the project selection piece works. Again, you can either choose your own project, or you can decide, okay, I'm not going to do a project in my organization, but there are a number of organizations or industries that I'd like to find out more about and get some experience in. So then you can talk to your classmates and see where they're thinking about doing their capstone projects, and you could maybe self-select for their team and say, well, if you are doing that project, that's something I'd be interested in doing. So in terms of how that process works, again, you nominate a capstone project. There is a form on Blackboard that you fill in for me, talking about who the organization is, the nature of the project, more on that in a second, and then who ideally you would like on your team. And if you already have identified team members, you put them on the form. If you're looking for team members, let me know and I can help you get team members. Similarly, if you're looking for a project, let me know and I can help you identify a project. So in terms of the project nomination and team selection process, that's how that works. So again, you have a lot of control over that process because we want to make it as valuable as possible for you as executive MBAs. You've already invested so much time and energy into your MBA that when it comes to the end of your MBA and the capstone project, we want to make that a very valuable experience for you. In terms of the grading process, once you've identified a project that you would like to work on, you have your team together, the next step is to identify an academic advisor. I specifically use the term advisor rather than supervisor because in my mind, supervisor implies that like they're up here and you're down here, and that's not it at all. It's very much working together, kind of side by side. So your academic advisor, importantly, is the person who will grade your capstone project. So obviously, the academic advisor who you choose should be someone who has an interest in either the industry or the topic that your project is about. So for example, if it's a strategy project, Brian McGrath might be interesting as a supervisor there, or an advisor rather, or Pat Gibbons, or someone else who has experience of strategy. If it's something more related to marketing, you might talk to someone from the marketing department. If it's something to do more with corporate governance or financials, maybe Neve Brennan. So think about the topic of your project and then try to figure out, okay, who would be a good academic advisor for that particular project or that particular topic. And then you approach them to say, this is our project, we'd love to have you as an advisor. They might say no, but hopefully if you get to them early enough, they will be able to advise your project to work as your advisor. So their role is to meet with you maybe about 3 times during the process, beginning, middle, and end, and give you some guidance on kind of the structure of the report, what you're going to include, and to make sure you get the balance right between the academic and the practical, because that's a tricky balance sometimes, and that's what your academic advisor is there to help you to do. And then, as we said, importantly, your academic advisor also grades your capstone project, so that's an important thing to keep in mind. So that's how the grading process works. Your academic advisor will grade you on your project. There's a grading rubric that we use that will be shared with you closer to the time. The next piece I want to talk about is examples of previous capstone projects. So if you're currently thinking, yeah, I'd like to do this, but I'm not exactly sure the type of project, really it's any kind of significant organizational project. So think of it like a consulting project. So it could be advice on strategy. For example, last year, one of the teams worked on a project for a bank, and the bank was deciding which sector of 3 they wanted to develop and spend more time developing because they knew they had to prioritize and focus their kind of resources. So the team did an assessment of their different strategic options, and they recommended one particular option and had a full set of recommendations around why that's the best option and what the bank should do next. Another common topic for capstone projects, in addition to those kind of strategic decisions, would be market entry and location decisions. So for example, we had a team a couple of years ago working with a hostel company, a company that owns a number of different hostels, and they were looking to not only decide between a few different locations for their next hostel, but also to have a process going forward that they could use whenever they were looking at location and market expansion decisions. How could they formalize that process? So what the team did was they used a weighted criteria matrix, and they came up with this really detailed spreadsheet and kind of financial model that the company could use going forward anytime they were making those decisions about new locations. So obviously that was really valuable. We've also done product launches, feasibility studies, organization structure. There was another capstone a couple of years ago that looked at a communication strategy, so suggestions on kind of restructuring the organization and then improving internal communications within the organization. That was a really interesting project. So hopefully you get the idea. Any kind of strategic project that's really of value to a company, and think of it really like a consulting project. So because that's what it is. You're working with a company to either solve a problem or pursue an opportunity, and you're giving them the advice and the recommendation. So you're using what you learned on your MBA to apply it in that real world situation, and to be able to come up with a set of comprehensive recommendations for that organization. Those of you who did the International Consulting Project in Iceland, you got a little taste of that already. So if you think of the Iceland project with more time, so more detailed, probably more complex, but that same process of helping, getting up to speed with who the company is, what the industry is, and then being able to assess the issue or assess the opportunity and provide a nice set of guidelines and recommendations for that organization going forward. So those are the types of projects that work really well for Capstone. In terms of deliverables and key dates, because I know that you guys like to plan and like to have dates in the diary, you really, I guess you can start thinking about your capstone now. Absolutely. Start having some conversations and thinking about whether you might want to have a capstone in your own organization or work with someone else on a different project. But you don't really have to start bringing it into sharp focus until after Christmas, which I know seems a very long way away at this stage. So the next date in your diary should be January 12th. We will have a capstone workshop on January 12th. So I will see you then, myself and or Pat Gibbons and or other people to be confirmed. And we'll have a workshop on that day to put a little bit more shape around the capstone. And then by the end of January, that's when you will submit to me your project nomination form, if you have one, talking about your suggested capstone project, so who the organization is, a summary of what the project is about, who the contact person is, etc. Again, that form will be on Blackboard for you, so it'll be very clear, and we can talk about it again on January 12th, if not before then. So those are the kind of next steps in terms of what's happening next in the process. So we have the workshop on January 12th. You submit the nomination form to me at the end of January. And then again, if you look on the Blackboard site, you'll see the further dates along from that. But I guess the main date to consider is that the submission date for the Capstone project is, I believe, the 8th of August. I'll check that. It is online on the Blackboard site. There's a module descriptor and there's also a slide deck with all these dates detailed for you that you can have a look at those and get those dates in your diary. Okay, so in terms of next steps, like I said, have a chat, have a think about, are you going to nominate a project in your own organization, or chat maybe to some of your classmates about what they're thinking about in terms of capstone. But like I said, there are no real kind of deliverables. It doesn't really have to come into sharper focus until January. So I know you'll be very busy between now and then. You have a lot to be doing between now and then. So that's the date you should focus on, January 12th, and then submitting the nomination form by the end of January. Hopefully, guys, that has given you an overall feel for what the capstone is about, maybe clarified your own thinking around where the capstone fits into the grand scheme of things. Again, it's kind of like your last hurrah on the MBA, where you apply what you've learned in a very real and meaningful way. I am around, obviously, in Smurfit. If you need to talk to me, if you have any questions about the Capstone project, please send me an email, kathleen.o'reilly@ucd.ie, and I'll be happy to answer any queries you have. I will also work with your excellent class reps to see if there is another date where I can be there in person to answer any further questions that you all might have. So in the meantime, thank you very much for listening. I hope, like I said, that's been of value to you and clarified some of your thinking around the capstone and what you need to be doing over the next number of months. And enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks very much, guys.